I genuinely think that the new community manager for Royale High is single-handedly helping save the game, and I want to make a video talking about it and just the past of Royale High's community management and how it's so different now, because I feel like a lot of people don't know the past behind the community management role and how it honestly used to be incredibly toxic, in my opinion, and really didn't value its creators, whereas now they have a community manager that, in my opinion, is at least somewhat PR trained, and they have made really, really good moves to making the community feel more heard and understood. Now, I do want to clarify, anytime I make a video and it's something somewhat negative about Royale High, I always get comments like, "Oh, Pommy, if you keep talking like this, you're never going to get in the Crown Royalty program." Miss Ma'am, that is not my goal. At the end of the day, anything negative I say is never untrue. Okay, I don't just say negative things to lie, I say things that are truthful, and if they're negative, that just so happens to be it's negative, right? And my intentions never should just be like a total negative Nelly, like it just be like a really nasty person. But at the end of the day, I feel like a lot of people are afraid to talk about the issues with Royale High, primarily because they don't want to be ostracized because of stuff that's previously happened in the game. Whereas me, I'm not afraid to talk about stuff, and I'm not afraid to share my opinion, and if that upsets you, I'm sorry. That's why it's an opinion. You can move on. Anyways, for those of you that don't know, Royale High has a track record that's somewhat iffy about their community management. And I want to quickly clarify, a community manager is somebody that is hired by a game to basically manage the community. So that means replying to comments. Sometimes a community manager will also do like the influencer connections, so large YouTubers and stuff for the game, they'll communicate with them about updates and stuff like that. And basically, it's someone who will just kind of manage the community altogether. And more so now with like larger games, there's someone separate that actually deals with influencers. But I guess in the past, they had a community manager that just kind of dealt with everything. And to be fair, not to totally ostracize the community manager, but I feel like they were like under a lot of pressure probably and had a lot of stuff they had to do. And the moral of the story too is community managers, although they are kind of accountable for what they say and how they handle things, a lot of the time there are external pressures telling them what to say and how to behave. So I don't want to just demonize the old community manager, because they were certainly being told certain things by certain people to relate to other people, and they were just the messenger in some of it. Sure, some of the way that they worded things wasn't great, but I do feel like people need to recognize it's kind of a systemic thing rather than just some person running freely saying, no, you're removed, no, you're out, you're in, I don't like you, whatever. There's a lot more to it than just one person going around and answering comments. There's definitely a lot of levels of verification and feedback that the community manager has to get. So with that in mind, for those of you that don't know the history behind Royale High's community management, about a year or 2 years ago now, there was some issues in the Royale High community, more specifically with influencers, people that were part of the Crown Royalty program, which is like their creator program, not being allowed to share their opinions without getting in trouble. Now, obviously, on my channel is all about sharing my opinions. It's about talking about things I'm passionate about, sharing information, and if that stuff is negative or positive, at the end of the day, my goal is just to tell the truth, right? Or what I believe to be the truth, what I'm led to believe is the truth based on information that I have and information that I found, right? And unfortunately, the issue with a lot of things, especially Roblox just as a whole with the Roblox creator program, is games don't like it when you talk poorly about them. And even if it's not something outwardly nasty and you're just like, hey, I really didn't like this update, I thought this was like not what you promised us, or you say something like that, games don't like that. And that's what I think is kind of iffy about being just a quote influencer, is that there's always this weird external pressure to behave a certain way and to say certain things. And at the end of the day, to be part of an influencer program, example, Royale High's Crown Royalty program, you aren't paid or anything like that. So I think it's unfair to give a creator a badge and then just expect them to basically be your, for lack of better terms, and just say whatever you want them to say, and to, portray a certain persona and act like everything's fine and basically just not share their true opinions about something, because that doesn't help. At the end of the day, you don't need people being completely negative all the time. But if you don't have discourse, you can't learn anything. You have to be able to have open conversations about issues and bugs and things that maybe didn't go over very well. If you just have a bunch of yes men, you just create this kind of echo chamber where nobody grows, right? You have to have active discourse for people to learn and for people to, to develop, right? So with that in mind, about 1 or 2 years ago, there was a situation where Call Me Haley, a popular Royale High YouTuber, put out a statement on Twitter. And I'm gonna be honest, I did have to go to her video to get these screenshots because they were kind of hard to find. But she put out this tweet, which was very obviously a joke. The tweet goes, okay, oh, no, this is the wrong one, sorry. Here's the original tweet. She said, oh, guys, I just found out you have to give Royale High your Roblox password to get the Halo. That's why it's so rare right now. People are thinking it's scams, but it's totally 100% real and not at all a joke. This is the new update. And that got 31,000 views. And I don't know, maybe I'm just like silly, but I think this is pretty obviously a joke. And before Royale High even commented about the situation, Call Me Haley put out a post saying, for legal reasons, I want to clarify that this is a joke. And I think it was it was implied this was a joke. Like, really? Are you gonna send your password to Royale High and they'll give you free Halo? That doesn't make any sense. And I think people know that. And a lot of people's defense of Royale High getting so upset about this was, well, there's so many little kids in Royale High, like they would know better. Miss ma'am, little kids shouldn't be on Twitter. I'm fairly certain the age restriction for Twitter is 13 years old. I'm pretty sure. And so any 13-year-old would know this is a joke. Okay, like it's not like they're 5, right? So anyways, Royale High responded to this and they were not happy. And they said, we'd like to clarify for obvious reasons that this isn't true. Please do not tell anyone in Royale High or anywhere else your Roblox password or any private information. Which I can agree, don't do that, but it's obviously a joke. Okay, it was a joke. And Royale High got very upset with Call Me Haley over this, and I will read some DMs briefly. But she ended up putting out a comment a little bit later where Call Me Haley said, okay, to sum up today, I was just being lighthearted and bored and doing banter. I was really not serious at all, and I want to make it really clear one more time before I get off Twitter for the night that I was just in a silly, goofy mood. I can't wait to carry people and drop them. And then this person says, it's okay, we knew you're being silly. And then she responds saying, okay, let's hope Royale High knows because I wasn't followed. And turns out, like, Call Me Haley wasn't the only person that was kind of dealing with some issues at the time with this ex-community manager. And again, I want to clarify, community managers are often told by upper management what to say, what to do. So you can't just, like, blame the community manager solely for this. I think this was a systemic thing. Right? And sometimes when games get really big, they think they have this authority over people that they really just don't have, right? And that just has to do with setting boundaries and very clear boundaries at the games. Be like, yeah, no, that's not how this is going to work. But anyways, after Call Me Haley made that post, she ended up getting a DM from Royale High. And I'm gonna be honest, these screenshots are kind of blurry, so I apologize. But it basically says, hi Haley, sorry for the delay in messaging you here. As you can see, we've been really busy, especially with social media related things. We want to reach out in regards to some recent tweets and some of our concerns. To clarify, after your tweet regarding sharing passwords, reached out to by some concerned parties regarding the implications of your tweet could have. As a result, we felt compelled to publicly comment on your post to ensure players' safety. If it weren't a matter of public cybersecurity, we of course would have DM'd you privately instead. While we understood this was a joke and believed the majority of people would have understood that, it's still very important to protect the minority of players who may be adversely impacted by it. There are players who share their passwords with other players for the exact reason you joked about. You received emails from players regularly, and players even send us their login information regularly, even before your joke. Side note, you're saying players do this anyways, so I'm gonna be honest, her joke probably didn't make that much of an impact. Players send us their passwords anyways, but you're gonna get demonized for doing that. Like, what? And then they go on to say, we always want to contribute to a safe online behavior as much as we can. We don't believe jokes are entirely off limits, but this may need to come with clarification for the more impressionable of our audience. Then they go on to say, your comment responses, especially those that were joking and laughing along with people who were directly mocking our response, does not reflect well on the relationship between the social media team and you. Hey, this reads to me, you're not allowed to disagree with us. Yeah, you can't mock us. That hurt our feelings, you can't say that. And then they go on to say, we want to always show mutual respect both ways between us and our program members and everyone else. We have discussed with you before about being open for you to contact us at any time should you ever need to discuss any issues or ask any questions. Despite this, you chose to discuss your frustrations publicly, sharing your concerns on social media despite having direct access to talk to us. Unfollowing you was unintentional, and had you reached out to inform us or ask why it happened, we would have gladly rectified the situation and explained what happened to you. Which I'm just confused. Like, this, I feel like that's a lie. You meant to unfollow her, and then you didn't expect her to say anything about it. And then the last part goes, we've tried to support you several times with your concerns and frustrations and have reached out to you often to check in. We've ensured we are open to you on multiple platforms should you ever have any issues to raise. We're sorry we haven't made it clear enough that we are here for you to talk to if you have concerns, and we're sorry we haven't been welcoming enough so that you can feel as though you're able to reach out to us whenever you have any frustrations, including the recent implication that we shouldn't have commented on your post. These are all examples of things we want to have open and respectful communication about. At this time, we feel we cannot successfully establish that communication with you, and it is important we do so to maintain a respectful association. Then they go on to say, at this time, as a result of our inability to establish a healthy communication between us, we've decided that we're going to have to remove you from our Crown Royalty program. We are deeply sorry that you have to do so, however, you will always be able to reach out to us, and you have been refollowed. All the weird stuff aside, the whole unfollowing and weaponizing following is just very weird. I think that's bizarre. And to be fair, this is an ex-community manager to my understanding. This is somebody who apparently, according to Royale High, no longer works for them. Maybe it's the same community manager still, but I think just like the way they speak is very different, so I would highly doubt that. But obviously this didn't go over well. And Call Me Haley did respond. There was a lot of back and forth, but I don't really want to just keep rehashing old situations because there's really no point in that. But this was just here to illustrate to you guys how Royale High used to handle this stuff. You know, it was kind of implied that you couldn't talk poorly about the game. If you had any criticism, you couldn't make a video about it. You couldn't talk about it. You had to message them directly and basically like almost like get their blessing to talk about it, which is like very bizarre and like control freaky in my opinion. And just a lot of back and forth and just really negative interactions with influencers where they felt like they had the inability to speak out. And after Call Me Haley was, you know, brave enough to talk about the situation, there was actually a lot of other influencers that shared similar experiences, having, you know, been talked down to or had, you know, interventions, example, kind of like a word to use there, with Royale High over like posts they made. At the end of the day, the reason that, you know, I would never personally want to have a code with any game is because I don't want to be forced to talk about specific things or forced to share a fake opinion, right? Again, my goal isn't to be negative, but I want everything I always relate to be truthful. And I'm not going to sit here and glaze a game just because they gave me some sort of like badge or like recognition in their game, right? Like that to me just doesn't come off right. It comes off disingenuous. And you know, I don't want to feel like I could be bribed into behaving a certain way. I think it's very bizarre. And I appreciate that, you know, Call Me Haley was courageous enough to be like, yeah, no, that doesn't work for me. And I think that really goes to show just, you know, why she's grown so much in recent months and stuff like that. But regardless, ever since this whole situation, Royale High was basically canceled. It turned into this big thing online, and there was like, I think there was a hashtag at one point, like Justice for Haley or something like that, but it basically blew up, and it was a big issue, and a lot of large YouTubers talked about it, and Royale High basically ended up backtracking and re-inviting people back to the program and saying they were sorry and blah, 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 blah. A lot of stuff. And this was at the same time where issues surrounding representation were brought to Royale High, and they said they're going to be doing like weekly inclusivity drops and stuff like that, which I don't think is still a thing. Maybe I'm wrong. Regardless though, in recent weeks, I've noticed while, you know, looking at Royale High's Twitter account that whoever is managing their social media is amazing. And I'm not just trying to sit here to glaze Royale High because I've been very clear, I'm going to share my honest opinion regardless if it's negative or positive, but genuinely, whoever they have hired to do their social media is phenomenal. Now I will put examples on the screen. I don't want to just like read off Twitter comments the entire video because I'm sure that'd be boring, but just the way that their social media manager now is carrying themselves is so much different to their past manager, and on top of that, to any other Roblox game. I think online, and I can attest to this, it's really hard when you've put so much effort into a game to not take negative criticism seriously, or to not take it as like harshly, or that's a reflection of you, right? Because at the end of the day, when anybody says anything negative about Royale High, it typically isn't about, you know, Night Barbie. It isn't about Lance. It isn't necessarily about them aside from like their personal actions. But if someone says, I don't like Royale High, that doesn't mean I don't like Night Barbie, right? If someone says, I hate Royale High, that doesn't mean I hate Night Barbie. It just means that you don't like the game, right? And I think it can be really hard to kind of separate yourself from something that you've worked so hard on. And so I can, you know, understand that. But what this new community manager is doing is, instead of like reacting negatively to negative feedback, they're actually taking stuff and are being like absurdly positive, which honestly has just created a really, you know, much more accepting and, you know, welcoming environment in the Royale High community. Now, I will put some tweets on the screen, but when players have negative feedback for Royale High, or they say, hey, I'm not happy with this, and it's probably some kid that just doesn't know how to word their stuff properly, right? Royale High will respond being like, thank you so much for sharing this with us. We will definitely share this with our development team. And I'm gonna be honest, 9 times out of 10 when a game says that, they're probably not gonna do anything with it. But it's the difference of, you know, refuting what somebody's saying and saying, no, you're wrong, versus saying, hey, we hear you, we understand you, thank you for sharing. Like, it really does put a different taste in players' mouths and make players feel as though they're being actually listened to. Even if there isn't any action enacted by their comment, it creates an environment where players feel like their issues and their concerns are being understood. And that's what's, I feel like, really changing Royale High and making players want to play the game more, is seeing the way the game is now taking player feedback, specifically because of this community manager, the way that they're addressing issues, the way that they're responding to comments and responding to players' inquiries. I think it's just so different from previous community managers that they've had and other community managers from other games. Not to get too much into the B-Play situation, but even from the Dressed Impressed event, you know, Dressed Impress, aside from like all of the drama with that game, you know, they had to let B plays go because of some allegations and just the way that she handled the event. And I think that's an example of somebody who has grown too attached to the game that they are managing, right? And, you know, when people are saying negative things about the Just in Press update, B plays, being someone who is, you know, behind the scenes and knew how much effort went into it, became defensive because it's, again, difficult to separate yourself from something that you put so much effort into and something that you have so much background context to, and you saw how hard people worked on it. So when you have a bunch of kids online saying, I don't like this sucks, it's hard to not take it personally and to not like get upset, right? But the difference here is that this community manager, I think they really understand their role as a community manager, and that their role is to facilitate clear communication between the game's developers and between the community and influencers, which I think is great, and honestly just a great change for Royale High, sorry. And genuinely, it's just really refreshing to see, because a lot of games on Roblox, you know, I think sometimes they overlook the role of a community manager. They think, oh, our game's for kids, like who cares? Like kids won't realize, blah, blah, blah. But the truth is, people who are playing Royale High now, some of them are the same people who've been playing since it started, right? So these people have aged up and they're a lot older. A lot of them are adults or, you know, older teenagers. And so them playing Royale High, they're not dumb. And not to say a younger kid is dumb either, but when you're an older player who plays a game more geared towards kids, you can pick up on subtle things and behaviors and language that maybe other people wouldn't. And, you know, it's a little bit harder to get one over on an adult rather than a kid, right? Because they recognize, hey, that's kind of gaslighty. Hey, that's kind of manipulative, whereas a kid maybe wouldn't pick up on that. And so I really do appreciate how the new community manager is really taking on a role of being understanding and accepting and just really enabling open communication. To be fair, I'm not an influencer for Royale High, so maybe someone who is in the Crown Royalty program could attest to whether or not the management is now better and there's better communication, because you never know. Maybe there's different people for influencer relations compared to social media. But regardless, from what I've seen in the comments and just discussions I've seen from other people, I think this new community manager is a really positive implication for Royale High, and I think it will really help boost their player base, because players want to play a game where they feel respected and that their viewership and player count is valued, and I think that's what this new community manager is doing. So anyways, thank you guys for watching. Let me know what you think about this in the comment section below. What are some things maybe you've realized with Royale High recently that have been changing as a result of this new manager? I'm not quite sure when this manager officially started, or if it's even a different manager. It might just be a shift in the way they've chosen to handle things, but regardless, I personally think it's great. I think it's a great step in the right direction towards restoring the game. Anyways, thank you guys for watching, and I will see you guys next time. Bye-bye!